What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Thoughts with Nick. It's pretty hot today, so I'm chilling in the shade. But as usual, we're going to start with a quote, and today's quote comes from Socrates. I've quoted him before, so I'm going to skip the background introduction today, get right into the quote. And what he said this time was, "Contentment is natural wealth, luxury is artificial poverty." And I think if you take a few minutes to kind of think about that, even without me trying to interpret and explain my views and thoughts about that quote, you'll be able to kind of easily determine what he was getting at, what his message was with that one. But just to provide a modern example to show how, despite the centuries and millennia that have passed since he spoke those words of wisdom, that they still ring true today, I want you to think about the difference between rich, famous, successful people, and like regular people. And I don't want to use those terms of successful and regular disparagingly. That's why I use the air quotes, because it's all a matter of perspective. But the point is, you know what I'm talking about, the famous actor, musician, celebrity type people versus other 9 to 5 work for a living type people. And just think about like how those people on the one side that seem to have it all, a lot of times they're not satisfied. They don't seem content. They don't even seem to enjoy their lives despite having what most people aspire to have and what most people think would kind of like get them where they need to be or want to be emotionally. And I mean, that speaks to something else, that it's never that next thing that's going to get you where you want to be. It's internal, not external. But anyway, that's a conversation for another day. Comparing those people to the regular people, the 9 to 5 type people, you'll meet a lot of people in that camp, in the second camp, the latter camp, that are really content and satisfied with their lives and their existence, and they derive genuine pleasure from what they do on a day-to-day basis, much more so than the celebrity group. And I think that there's something really deep there, something kind of profound, just juxtaposing those two groups. And I mean, feel free to continue to think about that comparison. I'm sure chances are it's probably crossed your mind in the past. But anyway, that's kind of the basis of what I want to talk about today, not class division, but the difference between contentment and happiness. And truthfully, this is a bit of a semantics argument, but it's a really important one, because happiness is something that we place so much emphasis on in our American and even just Western society in general, that happiness is the goal. You know, you want to have a happy life. You want to be happy in your day-to-day existence. You're seeking happiness at every turn. But is that not kind of like a misnomer? Is that not like a false goal, so to speak? And I don't know. I don't want to insert myself into other people's lives and say you're looking at it wrong, your approach is wrong, your thought process is wrong regarding your own goals. That's not my place. That's not my job. I would be out of line to try and do that. But what I do want to say is maybe you should try and replace happiness with contentment, because there is a difference there, and the difference is it's quite profound. It's very meaningful, and you'll derive a lot more genuine pleasure and satisfaction in your life if you chase contentment rather than happiness. And even saying chase there, that chase implies that you're going after happiness for that very reason, that contentment isn't something that you chase, it's something that you do. And I'm going to get into that and more throughout this video, but I just wanted to start by introducing the topic. So that's what today's topic is: the juxtaposition of happiness and contentment, and why you should strive to be content rather than striving to be happy. So just to kind of get things started off, I want to kind of explain what I believe to be the difference between the two. And I'm going to start with happiness. So I think happiness is a fleeting state, right? It's an emotional state that comes and goes. You're not happy all the time, and you can't strive to be happy all the time, because that's not realistic. It comes and it goes. There's peaks and valleys, and a lot of times it comes from external sources, right? So think about like spending time with your friends, whatever you're doing, whatever you enjoy doing with your friends. You spend some time kicking it with your friends, and then at the end of the night or whatever, the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You go back to your own place and you're by yourself again, and I'm sure you probably experienced a lot of happiness and happy moments, smiles, laughs, whatever with your friends. But now when you're back by yourself, that happiness begins to fade until the next day or 2 days later if you're lucky, and you kind of have a more longer lasting happiness. Maybe it'll last 2 days. I don't know. Everyone's different. But anyway, eventually that happiness fades, more short term. Probably within a few hours after being back on your own, you're no longer deriving happiness from the experience that you had with your friends. And I don't want to make it sound like they're mutually exclusive. You can definitely get contentment from experiences with friends. It's not solely happiness that's coming from here. Like, you can get a lot of contentment building, like the contentment from friends. I think like this is repeated shared experiences. One experience with friends one night, that's not going to give you contentment. That's going to give you happiness. But repeated engagement through different activities and building the social bond and connection, that's what it's really about to get to the contentment. But anyway, my point there was about happiness, and I'm getting ready to touch on contentment. So happiness is fleeting, it's temporary, it comes, it goes. A lot of times it's outside of your control. It's something that's enacted upon you by an external source, and you really don't have too much control over it. I mean, you have some, but it's radically different, in fact, from contentment in that regard. And contentment, to give the other side of the coin, is long-lasting, steady state versus the fleeting state of happiness. It continues long after the event or whatever it was that provided that contentment. Like I said, a lot of times this is going to be a compilation of many events over time, building on top of each other, accumulation type effect. And yeah, contentment will still be there weeks later, months later, hopefully. It's going to continue. You'll continue to feel content because it wasn't, it's not coming from something external. It's internal, intrinsic to you. You create your own contentment based on your continuous actions. It's almost like a state of being rather than a state of emotion. I just thought of that right now, and I really like that. Contentment is a state of being, while happiness is a state of emotion. Think about that, internalize that. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think I'm going to try and reflect on that personally and maybe see if I can boost my own pursuit of contentment even further. Anyway, yeah, that's what I see to be the difference between the two. And now I want to get into a little bit of maybe how each state comes to be, the state of being and the state of emotion, right? So happiness, as I mentioned, this is going to come externally. You can think about a night with friends, and a great example that I think of is a night of drinking. And I'm far from an advocate for drinking. I actually don't really... Conversation for another day again, but I don't think it's the greatest thing. I think it's kind of a bad thing. I think it's not a good vice. I think it's very destructive, and it's kind of a flaw of society in general that it's so accepted, widespread, approved of, while other things are looked down upon. Anyway, leave it at that for today, right? My point here, and the point that I was trying to make before I fucking disrailed myself with my own mental tangent, verbal tangent, was that a night of drinking is probably going to bring you happiness. A night of drinking with friends, not a night of drinking solo. That's a place you don't want to be. A night of drinking with friends is going to bring you happiness. You're going to be happy. You're going to smile, laugh it up with your boys, your girls, whoever, right? You're going to be enjoying yourself. You're going to have fun. Everyone's going to have fun, hopefully. And you guys are going to be happy. But then the next day, you look back, you probably smile and think about the night, and there's still going to be some happiness there. But you're going to feel it fade. It's going, but it's not gone yet. But it's fading fast. And if you're unlucky, you're also might end up being hungover. You might end up getting some post-drinking anxiety. And I found myself in both of those camps, despite what I was just saying about how I kind of drinking type stuff and drinking culture leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I'm not immune. I drink with friends from time to time. I mean, like I've said before in some other videos, moderation is absolutely the key. But I still do it sometimes, It is what it is. And I'm not looking down upon anyone that does or engages in that hobby, habit, whatever. It is what it is. I don't look down upon people for the activities that they choose to do. Once again, I'm fucking derailing myself with these tangents. But anyway, back to the point. A night of drinking, happiness. Next day, happiness is gone. Just like that. Shows two external factors. The drinking, alcohol, and the friends. Two things that contributed to that state of happiness that were outside of yourself. Versus something like contentment. You go to the gym. All right, one day that might give you happiness because you worked on yourself. You go for 3 years. Now you've got contentment. 3 years, you're content with your progress. You're content with your commitment. You're content with your self-discipline and your control that you committed to going for that amount of time. You stuck to something. You showed your dedication, resolve, all those kinds of things. Once again, you proved your worth to yourself. This is something that I go back to a lot. It's something that's really important. It's really important to contentment. But anyway, the point there and the juxtaposition of that I'm kind of trying to make between the 2 points is that happiness is something that comes from like a one-time thing, like one night, one interaction. Like another example is like food that you like, right? You eat that provides you temporary happiness, and then afterwards, like an hour later, that happiness is gone. It's not lasting too long. You're happy while you had that food to enjoy, but now that it's gone, so is your happiness. And on the other hand, like the other side of that coin, something like cooking, that could provide contentment. It's the creation of something versus the consumption of something. Happiness and contentment. Another good point that I just hit on right there. Happiness is derived largely from consumption, while contentment, I think, is derived largely from creation and contribution. So happiness and I'm hesitant to say. I'm trying to back up the camera a little so I don't have this sun on the top of my face. That's a little better there. I'm hesitant to say this, but I have to say it, right? It would almost be a lie by omission if I didn't say it. I think what I was saying before about the conflation of happiness and contentment, this is going to sound a little conspiratorial, but I think that it's almost intentional because of the materialistic culture that we live in today, the Western culture that is largely based on capitalist, consumerist, and I don't have a problem with capitalism. Consumerism, not particularly fond of, but it is one of the engines of capitalism. So what am I really to say there? Conversation for another day again. Check this out. I got this little guy here. This little guy is joining me today. Little green insect. The camera's not picking him up great, but you can see him. But yeah, the consumerism, going out and buying something, you're consuming a product that gives you happiness. Doesn't give you any contentment though. That state of happiness of acquiring something new that you didn't have previously. That's a introduction of a level of novelty, so to speak. Of you're adding a layer of, I don't want to say complexity because that's not the right word, so I'll say it like this. You're increasing the amount of personal possessions, so you derive happiness from that, right? You see something, you want it, you buy it, you're happy. Consumerism, materialism. Happiness is derived from that. It's an unfortunate reality, but that's the the fact of the matter. Versus contentment, I think, is driven a lot by creation. Um, Going back to the thing I was saying about food, you cook something, you're creating a meal, you have that skill in your repertoire, that knowledge, and you can share that skill. You can cook and then share that with your family, share that with your friends. Now you're sharing your creation with others, and that gives you a general sense of content because you're sharing your internal contentment with others. And I do think that's one of the main points in the basis of contentment is creation and sharing. The interaction with others, like I was saying before, socially, like one interaction one night with friends is going to give you happiness, but a continued rapport with friends, continuous over months, years, decades, whatever, will give you contentment when you look back on those memories in the aggregate, right? Like one night, one fleeting night of happiness, the next day you can look back on it and feel happy, but, well, if you're lucky, you can. But in the long term, you're probably not going to be happy, so to speak, when you look back on that memory. But if you have a long-term relationship with people and you look back on the accumulation of your memories on the whole, you're going to get a general sense of contentment there from the connection that you built and maintained with those other people. That's another way that I think you can derive content. What I was saying before, and I kind of got away from it, but I want to get back to it still and double down on it, is just like the consumerism that comes along with happiness, and how I think, like, this is something I want to say. Everyone always says, money can't buy happiness. Oh, and it's, frankly, I find that fucking laughable, right? Money buys happiness. Money doesn't buy contentment, and you want the contentment. Well, happiness is okay. You can want happiness too. But ultimately, you want the contentment. And that's like an intentional conflation, like I said, of the two, that people want to overwrite contentment with happiness so that you say money can't buy happiness, when in reality it can, because happiness is achieved through the fleeting state of consumerism and consumption. But what they really are trying to say is that money can't buy contentment. Yeah, money can't buy contentment. I don't know. I just think that's almost like an intentional trap, so to speak, because it invites you to consume more and more and more because you're told that money can't buy happiness. So you're like, fuck it, I'm gonna see if I can find out, right? I'm gonna see if I can buy enough shit that I'm fucking happy. And a lot of people fall into that trap, and sure, they will be happy with their new possession while it still has that sense of novelty. But as soon as that fades, so does the happiness, gone right away with it. And there's no contentment involved. And I do kind of feel like that's an intentional conflation on the part of corporations, maybe. I don't know. I feel like it could even be deeper than that, but I feel like it's intentional to drive materialistic culture, to drive capitalistic consumption, to make sure people keep buying and buying and buying to try and get some sense of happiness and enjoyment from owning an increased number of possessions. And just like I said before with the so-called famous people, like, they're rich, they could buy whatever they want, and the happiness is fleeting. There's no contentment involved there. So how do you become content? That's the question. Everyone wants to know, right? Everyone wants to know how you become happy, but what they really want to know is how you become content, because of this intentional conflation. I got a book here, The Hacking of the American Mind. Let me get my fingers off the title so you can read. The Hacking of the American Mind. I read this a good while ago. It's the basis for a lot of what I talked about today. It gets very deeply into the interplay and interaction of dopamine and serotonin, which I touched on, which I'd love to go into more detail about, but I don't think I necessarily am qualified to do so. But just to kind of recap and rehash, dopamine is happiness is derived from dopamine. Contentment is derived from serotonin. Dopamine gives you those peaks and valleys. It's almost like a drug. You need to get the highs to achieve the peaks, and without it, you fall into the valleys of whatever other emotional state that may be. Versus serotonin is more of a slow drip, continuous, steady state, long lasting, all those kinds of things, and that's just how it shakes out, right? Dopamine is related to happiness, while serotonin is related to contentment. And for more on that, like the actual neurological functionality and receptors and all the different biological stuff, like I'm not even gonna try and get into that. I could share some of what I know, but it would be so like banal, like I don't know. It would be very rudimentary, and it'd almost be like a waste of my time and your time as the listener to listen to someone with such a trivial understanding when you could go out here, grab this book, The Hacking of the American Mind, and I mean, this is something that caught my eye. I bought it on my own, not recommended, not plugging nothing here. This is just a book that I bought, genuinely enjoyed reading, learned a lot. Wish I understood it enough to explain it to you guys in a more cohesive, cogent fashion. And I'll probably have to read it again and maybe do another video where I get into serotonin and dopamine even more and break it down for you guys, so that if you don't want to, you don't have to buy the book. You don't have to spend the time reading. You can listen to me. But anyway, this guy, the author, Robert H. Lustig, MD, right? I'll give him a name drop. That's only right if I'm plugging his book. He gives a few different things at the end, and what he says: connect, contribute, cope, and cook. It's the 4 C's to reach contentment, right? That's what he says, and having read it and having kind of tried to put some of those actions and insights into my own life, I have to say I think he's got some good points there, like the connection, like I mentioned, with friends, the long-term establishment of social bonds over time, the accumulation of those memories does achieve a genuine state of contentment. Contribute. This is doing something greater than yourself. You're giving back to the community. You're involved in something that helps you. It brings you value because it's bigger than you. That's how I see the contribution side. Getting out and giving back to something in your community however you can, whatever that means to you, whatever resonates with you. Cope. He has in parentheses here, sleep, mindfulness, exercise. To me, I already hit on the exercise stuff with the gym, of like how over time you'll become content with your progress, and you'll have a state of contentment with your self-worth that you created through your commitment, right? And what he's hitting at here, and I agree with this too, I talked about it in another one of my videos, better inputs, better outcomes, better living, is just that your body needs certain things, and if you provide those inputs for it properly, you're gonna be on a path to contentment. And by taking care of yourself properly, you're much more likely to reach contentment, because you're giving yourself the underlying inputs, I guess, to get you there. I don't know. I feel like I might be kind of misinterpreting that one, but just to make it sound more like my other video in a kind of selfish way. I'm not doing that intentionally, obviously, but I feel like I might have done that subconsciously, but fuck it, whatever. That's besides the point. I might be kind of shitting on myself unnecessarily. But the final one is cook. And I hit on that a little bit too. And the reason I mentioned it is because he brought that up in the book. Cooking for yourself, cooking for friends, cooking for family. You make something, and there's a general sense of contentment there from spending the time to create something. I think that creation is another way Like, I think he could have included a fifth C of creation, that he could have put like the cooking under and then expanded to other things. But I guess this guy, he might be big into cooking and all that. And cooking, the way he presented it, also creates those social connections too, when you bring the friends into it to share the food with. It's kind of like synergistically combining a couple different aspects to help you reach the contentment in a more streamlined fashion, I guess you could say. But yeah, I don't know. That's what he presented, and I have to say I agree with that. Like, but just to put my own spin on it, I would say contribution and creation is how you reach contentment, you know? Contribution in terms of giving back to something greater than yourself, contributing your time, contributing your effort, contributing yourself in terms of time and in terms of effort, just contributing yourself, contributing what you have to give to something that's greater than yourself, something that's better off with you having contributed to it. That will give you contentment because you know you are a part of something greater than yourself. That's something that I feel like is kind of intrinsic to humans as a collective. Like, we have a need internally, a yearning almost, to be a part of something greater than ourselves, and that's a way to reach that contentment. Like, because once again, synergistically combining those two ideas, contributing to something greater than yourself, chances are you're probably also going to foster a connection to the other people who are there doing that same thing. They're like-minded. And next thing you know, now you're creating that social connection, which is going to give you contentment as well over time. The contentment stuff is all very related. It all ties together very well, which is why I really like this idea. Versus the materialistic side, it's not connected to anything. It's all very like selfish, personal. I need more. I need this. I need that. I need to be happy. Like, bro, fucking stop. Help somebody else. Just, I don't know. It's to me, it's very selfish. But right there, I was starting to get a little preachy, so we're gonna walk that back. So what I just covered right there was contribution. My other one is creation, right? What I'm doing right now. This gives me contentment. Creating a video, creating anything, creating a meal, a meal from scratch, creating a book. You write something, creating an article, once again, write something, creating a party, like that sense of planning and bringing people together for somebody else. Like, say you're planning a surprise party. That's going to give you contentment when you see the reaction of the person you are surprising, their genuine surprise and enjoyment that somebody would take the time to do something like that for. And that's both. That's frankly three different ones right there. You're contributing to something greater than yourself for that other person. You're creating the party, and it's creating the social connection. That's three things to bring content. Wow. That was a good example. I'm going to give myself a pat on the back for that. But yeah, that's the basis, Try and be less of a consumer and more of a creator. And this isn't like some unique, miraculous idea I just came up with. This is pretty basic, This is a pretty basic idea, but today we're so lost in this materialistic culture where everyone thinks that having that next thing, making that next purchase is going to make them happy, when really what they're searching for is contentment disguised as happiness, because that's what they were told. They were told to be happy. They weren't told to be content. And it's easy to conflate those two ideas. And I don't know. It's hard, man. It's hard to get outside of the box of materialism and happiness, because it does feel good to buy something new for yourself. It does feel good to like whatever it is, food item, a clothes item, whatever. Like, it feels good to buy something that you want. I'm not going to say that it doesn't. It does. It feels good to like get things that you want. But did you hear what I just said? getting things that you want. Inherently selfish. Doesn't mean it's necessarily wrong per se, but it's inherently selfish. And I think contentment is more selfless. Selfish versus selfless. And just to kind of wrap things up, I don't want to expand and expound more and more and more on the materialistic culture and the problems that could be a whole nother video in itself. But 3 or 4 different things that I mentioned today that I think are really important and what I want to leave you with. Contentment as a state of being versus happiness as a state of emotion. That's the first one. Contentment as created through creation and contribution versus happiness, which comes through consumption mainly. That's the second point that I want to leave you with. Third, the juxtaposition of serotonin and dopamine. Dopamine is the fuel for happiness, peaks and valleys. It's almost like a drug, build up a tolerance. Serotonin is the fuel for contentment, long-term, slow drip, long distribution horizon. And then finally, a final point, I kind of say this in all my videos, but just don't take my word for it. You got the book that I just showed you, right? There's plenty of information in here, way better than what I just said, way more in detail. And just learn for yourself. Try and put some of the ideas that I said into action and see if you find them to be true. If you don't, that's fine. I'm not saying I have all the answers. I know for sure that I don't. But what I'm trying to do is provide the thoughts that I feel that I do feel strongly about to others, so hopefully they can kind of escape the materialistic trap and some of the shortcomings of modern society and have a better existence for themselves. So please get out there, and rather than trying to be happy, try to become content. You hear what I just said there? Being happy versus becoming content. It's a continuous journey. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen over many nights, over time. And before you know it, hopefully you'll be content with the actions that you've taken over the past months and years. It'll accrue to a final state of contentment versus that fleeting state of happiness. And from there, you just got to keep doing what you're doing, keep maintaining that sense of contentment, that state of contentment, rather. And you'll be on your way to a much better life, I believe, than if you pursued happiness. So thank you guys. If you made it through to the end, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for listening to what I had to say. I mean, I'm going to let you know something. This is my first video that I went just stream of consciousness off the dome. I mean, the quote, I wrote it down, and I had a couple of talking points. But all my other videos so far, I wrote a whole script and I read from it pretty much. So today, I might have repeated myself a little bit. I might have been a little redundant, but I'm proud of myself for being able to go off the dome for 30 minutes and talk about these ideas. And I just wanted to let you guys know that this was a big step for me. So thank you for joining me on this journey. Thank you for taking your time to listen to what I had to say. And I hope that you learned something. I hope that you took something from this video. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Get outside. Enjoy the sun. Enjoy the weather. And get content. It'll take some time, but I promise you it'll be worth it. Thanks, guys. Bye.